Maybe. All right. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to session 4 of 6 for the Thursday class. I said it just like it looks on the screen for you because I'm wanting to draw your attention to what this looks like because this is the new thumbnail on all the videos for your class. So if you've gone to look at a video in the last couple days, you would have seen it look like this. All 6 of your videos have this white background with green print. The Friday class has a green background with white print. So you just have to know that their go green and your go white. And so if you're looking for the right video for your class, you want to make sure that you're in the Thursday class. And I have been working with my in-home video expert, and we did create a playlist. So later on, if you send a link to video 1 to somebody, it should bring them all the way through the series. So we're just trying to clean up what we're trying to do. But I just wanted to make sure, because it was really confusing when you got to our YouTube page. You couldn't tell one class from the other. So this is your class screen right here. Getting started today, I want to say that that's starting to be what it looks like on campus. I would imagine by the end of the week, all those trees will be in bloom there. I think that's Yakeley Hall that we might be looking at there. And I just wanted to start by acknowledging that this week in all of my conversations with people, the fact that it's week 8 of the stay-at-home, stay-safe orders is just really been shocking to people. I don't think anybody really expected for us to be in the same scenario kind of this many weeks out. And so while that's true, and I'm glad that we put a 6-week course inside of that, because people have completed that course already, and you will too, most likely. So even though that's happening, and we have a lot of feelings about it, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot going on with it, we do want to just for the next hour invite ourselves to set that to the side to see if we can learn just a couple more things that might help us navigate all of it as we go through all of this. I want to thank the closed captioning teams still at work. Another one got completed. There's another one's like almost completed. We're still working on that, but if you're interested in joining that group, just give me an email. I know somebody said last week they would maybe be more ready this week after last semester ended. So let us know about that. The survey reminder, we didn't have as many of you guys fill out the survey, the one that comes in the follow-up email. So because I think we missed a week, I just want to remind you there'll be a survey in that follow-up email when you get the link to the recording, which should happen just in a couple days. There will be a link to the survey. And I'd really like you to partly there are reflective questions, and partly it's my way to feel like I'm communicating with all of you, because I can't check in and ask you how things are going when we're not in the same room together, except for the Zoom room on Thursdays. So please, please, please take some time to complete that. I'd like to have a higher number next week. So if you didn't, no judgment. I know a lot's going on. People asked a little bit about Health for You resilience training in general. And what I would say is, the model that I've put together over the last 15 years, it gets taught in a variety of formats on campus. One option for that is to go sign up when we get back for the Sustainable High Performance class that happens through the Organizational and Professional Development Office. Your team could invite me to come talk to a group of people. And then also through the Health for You lunchtime series. I work all the way through the model every year. And so you can jump into that at any point in time. If you're interested in knowing when those Health for You classes happen, the best way to do that is to get our program update, which if you go to any of our website pages on the bottom right, there's a place that says Health for You newsletter. If you click on that, it's a simple form and you'll be registered, and then you'll get those notices when new classes start, like the Mindful Self-Compassion class that started yesterday. And I also want you to know that Megan and I are cooking up an essential skills webinar follow-up conversation, which will be open to people from both classes, where we'll just continue to I'll continue to share things that occur to me that might be helpful, and people can we'll have chat questions and poll questions, and people can kind of have a check-in about continuing to learn the skills. And we're trying to get these skills into our bones, as Brene Brown says, so that when something happens, I kind of have a reflex to go towards resilience rather than towards upset and reactivity, towards being responsive rather than reactive. And I will also prepare, like, the different pieces of the model and some books for you to start reading. So just when after the class, you'll get some ongoing learning opportunities that way too. And then there will be this twice a month webinar check-in if you're interested. I'm going to start by just opening up the chat here this afternoon because didn't mean to do that, because it does help us, help me kind of know where you're at and what's going on. So I'm just interested in you sharing with me some of your noticing. Like the number one most important resilience skill is waking up the witness that can catch on to what you're up to. That makes it more like, what are you bringing to your situation rather than only having your focus be what's coming at you. So I would like to know, I should probably show you the questions. How did your noticing go this week? What kinds of things did you notice, and what happened when you noticed? It's a very similar question to the one I asked last week, but what noticing occurred this week? Just give me a flavor of it if you could. A simple way to put the 5 things into play was on a walk with my kiddos. I noticed a dandelion and drew attention to it. From there, we realized there were so many more than we thought. Like, kind of like, oh, wow, check it out. Yeah, colors like that a lot. When I ask myself to notice color, like I just did it, like all the variations of green in my backyard right now are amazing. I've noticed I'm letting go and taking charge, deactivating toxic social media. So you'd probably notice you were having a hard time with the media. I noticed myself losing patience. And again, the other question I'm asking is what happened when you noticed? So if you can tell me that, what happened when you noticed? So somebody noticed that their family members were having really complicated feelings. And so instead of just kind of meeting that, sounds like with reaction and maybe judgment, you could you understood the situation more. So that's you noticing what's going on for other folks too. What are you noticing this week? If it didn't go well this week, can you say any more about why it didn't go well for you? Again, there's not just points for like super awesome noticing and noticing that you're super grounded and centered. It's really about noticing the variation and the change. So I've noticed I'm still having hard times, but they seem to be farther apart, if not less intense. Yeah, sometimes they're just as intense when you have them, but there's a bigger gap in the middle, which means your system's having a chance to reset. I noticed when I was angry and overwhelmed about how behind I am with work. And that's a really important thing to notice, because while you're actively angry and overwhelmed about it, you're just spinning. Like you're in that experience. Sometimes if we can acknowledge and honor that we're feeling that way, and then, become willing to let that go, to jettison that away, so that we could get our bearings to decide what are we going to do about the fact that we're behind at work. It's really important. A new bird call. Congrats. That's kind of cool. Somebody's saying resistance towards doing anything. There's a really common theme this week about people feeling zero motivation. There's a couple themes, like just the quick themes, just in case you're thinking it's just you. Lower motivation than people have had in the past. Just kind of like hit the wall of weariness is happening for folks. People feeling just a lack of motivation. And then actually making up that maybe they're never going to be motivated again. So you just want to know that comes and goes. Okay. Notice the robin with a worm's mouth that flew to my front eaves and returned to the tree in my window must have a nest. Yeah. Yeah. And while you were noticing that, I'm hoping that you also were allowing yourself to physiologically just drop. Relax. You want to be relaxing while you're noticing. Noticing flowers opening up that have never had more significance. Yes, it's true. Getting anxious and about imagining future scenarios, which subsided with the 3-breath reset. Yeah, it's natural for us to get a piece of data or be missing a piece of data, and we tend to fill, if there's a blank, we tend to fill it into the negative and in the future. So the 3-breath reset will help you kind of keep yourself on a short leash there. That's good. Good. Okay. Noticing yourself getting worked up, noticing yourself having already thought thoughts. And we're going to talk about that today. Like I noticed that I did notice it. That's a great. All right. I noticed the sun on the green. It's nice to pay attention and take time to revel in the beauty. Yeah. Revel in the beauty and allow yourself to rest just in this moment. Remember, we're looking for awake mental rest. Times when we're not running around trying to process and fix everything. So less judgment and less judgment about noticing things. Being tired and frustrated, then paused. Didn't create a story about it. You just let yourself feel it, and then hopefully with some rest. Things are changing both at work and at home. So what you noticed is that things were askew again, and so that's important to notice so that you can come back to that reflective place. Yeah, good. Lots of good noticing happening here. And apparently we owe a debt of gratitude to the birds because they are capturing a lot of people's attention today. I realized how much power I give already thought. When I'm upset about something, I went back to the 3-breath reset, and it created a new mind picture for me. Yeah, somebody asked me to say a little bit more about the Viktor Frankl quote that I talked about last week about there being a space. Between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. For this person, when they let go of their already thought, it created a space, and then a new picture came through, a new insight. So you notice you're losing patience, you go figure out a way to get your bearings and then come back. Yeah, good. Notice the Zoom fatigue, and then sometimes we notice we have to give ourselves permission to set a boundary with it, whether it's the toxic social media or just too much screen time, including this one. I am aware that we're talking about Zoom fatigue and that we are on Zoom. Feeling more resigned and calmer. The calmer part's super awesome. If the resigned part is that you're accepting that something is what it is and that you can't control it, that's great. We still want to be about what we can bring to it, like in terms of like how we might influence or how we might adapt to it. So good. Noticed how my internal self-talk was abusive, even though I've been so understanding of everyone around me. Yeah, so you notice that you might want to shift that, right? That you might deserve as much care and compassion as the person next to you. So, okay, lots of good noticing. I'm going to leave it there for now. Again, this week I will go and sit through all the noticing and read it and let it inform our next conversation as well. But it sounds like a fair number of you are noticing. We're not going to do a poll chat today, so I won't know kind of what percentage of you feel like that. Oh, shoot. I will be right back. I thought I turned my camera off, but you guys probably saw me run out of the room. It's because I forgot to grab my book that I want for this next part, which is called Real Happiness at Work by Sharon Salzberg. And it's our time to just kind of drop right now, to try to drop. So I'm going to ask you to check your external environment and just make whatever changes you might need to make to it to give yourself a fair chance to get something out of our conversation today. We're going to just let you settle in. So I would love for you to just start to do some breathing. I've been reminded again to remind people that when you're doing deep breathing, it's really essential that you fully exhale. Because when we start to get anxious and caught up, we don't exhale enough, and then there's not enough space. We really want the incoming air to be able to kind of fully expand our lungs. And we can't do that if we don't exhale. So when you exhale, you can use your diaphragm and push it out, make a sound like a tire. Later on today, try inhaling and then holding your breath and then exhaling for as long and count, just doing it regular, and then do it again with that letting the air out of the tire sound, and see how much farther you can get. I'm going to turn off my video right now because I really want you to just hear my voice and to also let yourself either close your eyes, or if you're not comfortable with that, just find a spot in the floor just a few feet ahead of you. Or again, you can look at the candle flame on the screen in front of you. As you're just noticing your breath coming in, and then noticing your breath coming out. Noticing your breath coming in, and on the exhale, letting yourself drop deeper into your body. As you notice your breath coming in, I'd love for you to offer some loving kindness to yourself by saying silently, "May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live at ease." Repeat the phrase inwardly at a pace that's pleasing to you, focusing your attention on one phrase at a time. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live at ease. Continuing to repeat that phrase inwardly. If you find your attention wandering, begin again. Allow your feelings, thoughts, or memories to come and go. Here, the anchor is not your breath, but the repetition of these traditional phrases. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live at ease. Call to mind someone who has helped you or been good and kind to you. Picture the person and say their name to yourself, and get a feeling of their presence. And then offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live at ease. Even if the words of the phrases feel strange or awkward, recognize that they're the vehicle for connection with this person who you care for. Now call to mind somebody you know who's having a difficult time right now. Picture them and say their name to yourself and get a feeling of their presence. Offer phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live at ease. Finally, you can offer the force of loving kindness to all beings everywhere, known and unknown, near and far. May we be safe. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we live at ease. Just take a few more moments to just breathe that in. The goodwill and the good energy I'm sending to you and sending to me. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And this week, I'd like you to have some moments where you offer loving kindness to yourself and offer loving kindness to others who are struggling. So many folks have a collection of struggles that they're moving through. When you feel like there's nothing you can do, loving kindness is one thing we can energetically always do. And while we're tending to those people, we're also tending to ourselves. Because when we open up to that energy space to send somebody good energy, we're actually opening up and allowing our innate health and well-being to tend to us as well. Just reminding us of the 6-word framework. So 22% of you were using it last time. I just wanted to bring it up, have you put it in your head again, where we want to acknowledge what's happening, honor the full range of emotions about what's happening, become willing to release it so that we can relax back into that open space, ask ourselves reflective questions, and then hear from that, hopefully, a call to action, value-guided action, which we're working towards talking about. One of you asked the question this week, whoops, I already gave that away. One of you asked the question this past week, why aren't people willing to release? What people seem to be like, they're acknowledging and honoring it, and they're maybe really in an upset. Why don't they release it? So instead of me just answering that question, I wanted to see what your thoughts were to that question. So I'm going to quickly open my chat back up. Before you answer that question, somebody asked me to hold the book up again. It's called Real Happiness at Work by Sharon Salzberg. I see that Megan already answered that question. Sorry, Megan, I didn't see that. Okay. Why aren't people willing to release? Please share with me your answer to that. They may have created a rule. And Emily, do you have a thought, like, do you have an example about like what that kind of rule would be? Like, what kind of a rule would a person have? Past experiences, being afraid to release? The person has said fear. Fear of what? Fear of what? I'm just curious. Fear of letting go. Like, what's the fear, do you think? What's scary about that? People don't know how. I think that's true. I think they also don't know that they need to. I see some of the rules here, right? Like, they feel righteous in their anger. Yeah, sometimes, sometimes people feel like it's just, if I let go of my anger, then I'm saying I don't care about the issue. Or if I let go of my anger, I'm saying you're right. Or if I let go of my anger, I'm letting you get away with it. And what I want to try to do in this conversation is separate out that you're not releasing it really for the other people. You're releasing the energy of what you're experiencing so that you can open up and have new ideas. It does not mean that you agree with the situation. It does not mean that you are signing on. It does not mean that you're giving in at all. Just looking at the rest of these answers. Pride, yeah, a lot of times it's that, sometimes we don't even release when we know we're not right. So what that is, it's just rigid attachment to a thought and to an idea. And then this other rule of don't give in, don't let up. That means you're weak, perhaps. I'm just trying to explore some of the reasons why we get in our way. Being wrong or being vulnerable. Yeah, sometimes when you release, like you know how to do anger, but you don't know how to do what would come if you didn't let yourself be angry. So it does sometimes, vulnerability is when the feeling we get when there's risk, emotional exposure, and the unknown. If we don't know what will happen if we release. But what I want you to try to start to get is that when you release, hopefully throughout today this will get clearer. When you release your attachment to the thought and to the experience you're creating, it starts to become more known that what you get is a better energy and better ideas. And I think that people who have been working and learning this for a while start to have faith that if they let go of what they've been creating, something else comes. And then I don't even have to decide what that other thing is, because sometimes I don't release my upset or my first story because I don't know what the second one is. So you start to have faith in resting in the not yet known so that a good idea can come through and encourage you. And we don't create that space. So habit, someone's saying normality, habit, absolutely. Like we just get so tight with it and so we have to, it might look weak to others. It also might look really strong to some people too, that you were willing to like allow yourself to shift. The shift is really powerful when we start to release. And so that also supports the learning sometimes. Resistance does tend to make you feel like you're controlling, but a lot of times you're clenching, but you're not actually changing anything, particularly if you're resisting and resenting something that you really have no control over. Maybe because they feel like they're being judged or afraid. Yeah. So sometimes people do it because it feels like a should. Habit, getting over, giving up control was a barrier for me. Yeah. So, you have to consider the possibility that if you release your upset or your energy, or if you become willing to let it pass, that something else will be there for you. So this is kind of an encouragement to just try on giving yourself permission to let something go in the moment. Again, you're not letting go. There are things that I get upset about sometimes that I'm never going to stop caring about. And yet in some moments, the way I'm holding it isn't useful to me or anybody else. It's blocking my flow. It's causing me to act out of alignment with my values. So dropping back into my health and well-being, my innate health, it's not about the issue. It's about my framework and about how I want to operate differently. If I let this go, this person won't know that I was hurt. See, that's kind of idea. Like if I let it go, if I stop feeling hurt, then they'll never know that I was hurt. Except that when I let it go, if when I'm dropping and releasing and relaxing into my health, I ask myself, did that really matter? And myself says yes. And my value is to honor myself, then I'm going to actually have to talk to the person about a different boundary. And so I actually might get to fixing the situation sooner if I actually release my upset. So, okay. So you saw some of my answers already. They're either too fused with a particular thought. Sometimes it's because we got hijacked by the thought we had, and we're just so physiologically up in it, we haven't had a chance to even notice that, which is why it's important to notice your emotions it's important to start to notice, what does your body feel like when it's resting? When you're calm and centered and grounded, how does your body feel? What's your emotions like? What's your language like? This is like those of you that are noticing yourself swearing, you're noticing yourself go from your grounded, centered self into your uncentered self, which is super good data. So precursor for this, the self-reflection worksheet number 3, which is already in the folder, Google folder, has an exercise on it this week that I would really like you all to do. It's going to ask you to imagine a moment when you were centered and at your best, and to bring that into your mind as fully as possible and remember yourself then. Might have been 2 minutes ago or might have been a week ago. And then answer the questions related to that moment. And then to do it again with a moment when you weren't centered and at your best. This is the most important homework anyone ever asked me to do because it started to help me develop an awareness of the contrast for myself, of when I was reactive, upset, resisting. It came like a dashboard indicator that would help me realize that it might be important to release. And so knowing that I need to release, understanding the value of releasing, which we're still trying to help you have a physiological experience of, and then having some sense of how. And the how really is all of the reset skills, because like I said last week about the big balloons, our thoughts, our story, our physiological experience, we're having thoughts and then the physiology comes out of that. It can't continue without us. So when we try to get rid of it by fighting it, by containing it, by wrestling with it, by resisting it, it can't be anything other than that. It isn't until we bring our attention to something else and we decide to let it start to dissipate that it can. So, okay, I'm going to go to the next one here. The lighting's a little bit different by this window. I'm having a hard time seeing the button to switch, if you're wondering what's up. Wanting you just to do an emotional wellness check-in right now, just a quick assessment of what's happening with your physical state, what's going on with your mood, what's the quality of your state of mind like, which goes back to this picture here. What's the quality of your state of mind? Are you really busy-minded? If so, we want you to try to bring your attention to the sound of my voice, to your breath. Start to let that come back down into receiving mode. Your state of mind is separate from your circumstances. So also what's going on with your rule book? Do you have a judgment going on? Do you have a belief? Do you have a strong thought? This is what I was talking about your state of mind being not at all created by the circumstance. You could be doing something really difficult and challenging, and your state of mind could be crystal clear and very engaged and very present and very solution-oriented, or not. And you can be doing something that typically brings you great joy and relaxation, and you might be really, your state of mind, the quality of your thought world might be really jazzed up. And someone sent me this picture. I think it's a great example that what should be the warrior pose becomes the worrier pose if we're trying to do yoga in a low mood, particularly, and in an active, busy state of mind. So whatever you're doing, we want to start to notice what's the quality of my state of mind. And one of the questions that I'm going to ask is you next week, Megan, it'd be great if you could make a note of this for me, is if you were to think about your state of mind, if you catch yourself in states of mind, I'd like you to start to come up with words that would describe it for you. Some examples are, sometimes my brain feels like popcorn. My state of mind, it's very busy and it's got a lot of activity and I can't stay with one thought very long because it's just popping all over. There are times when I'm overwhelmed and my state of mind feels more like a blender, like it's just on puree. It's just really fast and spinny and I'm not making any sense of anything really. Sometimes it feels like the loading, buffering, like data, like when you have disk TV and it says that the data hasn't been downloaded from the satellite yet. like I just can't get my thought to come to me. I'm just a little thick, perhaps. Sometimes my state of mind is crystal clear, I can see to the bottom of the lake. It's totally clear. Sometimes my state of mind feels like bubbles and pop. Kids told me that, like that sparkling mind. Like I'm having all these ideas, and I'm in a very creative state of mind. I'd like you to describe that for you, because I'd like you to be able to notice for yourself when you're there. Okay. So here's that quote again. Somebody wanted to talk more about, and it fits with where we're headed. Okay, so they didn't understand it. So between the stimulus is just the circumstance. So between the stimulus or circumstance and your experience of that circumstance, your response, the stimulus and your experience of it, there's a space. I call it a gap. There's a gap. There can be a gap. For some of us, there's not very much of a gap. Something happens and bam, we have a thought right away, and right away we have a reaction and a reality. Maybe it's like super helpful, over helping, or maybe it's anger, or I don't know what comes first. But whatever your first thought through is, if your first thought through comes really fast, then there's not going to be much of a gap. What we're wanting to do is start to create more of a space, to like let there be a bit of a space. So our culture is so sped up and so rapid that I can take a picture of myself and send it to my sister, and she can have it in exactly less than a second. Everything happens so rapidly that we don't value a pause. We don't value a pause. We don't value quiet. We don't value silence. Like if somebody says something at a staff meeting to me, and I feel like I'm not allowed for there to be a space between the question and my answer, I'm going to give the first thing off the top of my head. When quite honestly, often the first thing off the top of my head is not the best idea. So can we get the question and allow a space? So in that space between what just happened and my creating a reality about it, there's some power to choose, he says. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So I want to, there was also a question about this equation again, and to say some more about this equation. And what I would say is, so there you have in the blue circles, those are the stimuluses, those are the circumstances. So between the blue circles and the gold square, which is your response to the circumstances, your personal experience in the moment, there's a space. Why won't it work? Having trouble today. It was my breath reset, because I was going to judge myself about having trouble when really I'm just having some trouble today. So I'm going to take a breath and reset. So here's the circumstance and here's the space, right? What I could do is draw that whole thought cycle right in that white space, because the circumstances are happening, and then I'm going to grab a thought, and that thought's going to get magnified by my consciousness, and it's going to start to become my reality of those circumstances. I'm going to have a physiological feeling and an emotion, and then out of that I'm going to take some behavior. So there's a space, and in that space it's our creative space. So there's a moment, so when something happens, there's this moment when I haven't created my response yet. That's the space he's talking about. Or there's also the possibility that something happened and I did have an immediate response. But if I understand how I operate and I'm inside out oriented, I will more likely see that. And then I have a chance for a second opportunity, because I can release what I just made up. I can say, well, that was a thought. I started to say, wow, Lisa, there's a thought that'll take you places. And that isn't always helpful. So when you start to see that there can be a gap between what somebody says or does or gives you or hands you, or some problem that shows up. Like yesterday I was trying to change my spare tire on my Tahoe. There were some things not going well with that. At one point, I thought something broke, like this thing happened. And my first response was, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, I don't have time for, I just had like frustration and upset and all kinds of things going on. But because I saw it, I was able to like create more space again. I'm like, okay, all right, I don't need to be making that up. That's probably not going to be helpful. I'm going to acknowledge that this is a little bit hard. I'm going to honor the emotions of that, and I'm going to release it. And like, I'm going to let myself kind of get my bearings, and then I'm going to see what happens next. And I'm happy to say that I got the tire fixed. I got it to Discount Tire. I followed all the safety procedures. I came back. There were lots of moments where there was something that happened, and my old self would have made up quickly and probably negative response to it. But because I live with more of a gap now, I have time. So when he says the power to choose, I think that it's allowing space for other possibilities to come through. And then if I do if I don't see myself have that first thought through, then there's no choice. When people say she likes to be miserable, I say, no, she doesn't. She just, something happens and her first thought generates misery. But I don't think she's like, yay, misery. It's just she hasn't seen enough to see that her first response to that doesn't have to be misery, right? And that if we help people understand that, then we might just try to create the gap. Because if you have a misery habit and you go through a day, there's all kinds of things to get in misery about. And you're going to, unless you start to make a space, because there's this between the stimulus and the response. I don't have to choose misery if I understand what we're talking about. Megan, I know earlier today you had a point about this. I'm not sure. Do you think I made your point, or is there anything more you'd want to say?
I think your Tahoe example is perfect in the sense that it's okay if the first thought through gets through. But if you're able to quickly realize that, you can either change your experience right then, or if you don't, and you realize later that something didn't go well, you have a chance to circle back with someone and really maintain those relationships. And again, it goes back to that releasing. But like, you own it too if you circle back. So it also teaches others that when you're working with them, that you're a safe person to circle back with too if they don't bring their best space. I think that that's really important.
We start to develop grace for the space, like, and how innocent it is for people, particularly if someone that you love or care for or work with, or that you love and work with, because that happens too, that they just have a fast reaction. Typically, if they're in a low mood and they're busy-minded, they're going to not, react best. So often, our first reactions aren't the best. And I don't want you to notice that and then get into a bunch of judgment. I just want you to understand that you're human and make space for it so that you can have a different experience. So I was saying to Megan earlier that it's really important to remember this, that if you have part of this learning be like after the fact, like you just had, like you had a thought and a feeling and a behavior before you saw it and you don't like the behavior, okay, you want to fix it. And then also just know, you're just wanting to learn how this works because you have been doing the things you've been doing for a long time, which is what we're going to spend some time going back briefly to go forward.
One more thing just before you move on.
Sure.
That's a question in here that I think fits. Somebody asked about how do you get others to value that space, and I think it's okay for us to ask for that space, and that's something we're not accustomed to doing, but I think that that's okay. And you might have some other thoughts on that, but I did want to not lose that piece.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question and your response, Megan. It's you have the right to claim space. And it can be unsettling because a lot of people go fast, and sometimes you're in a staff meeting, everyone's going fast. It doesn't mean they're going wisely. It just means they're going rapidly. And so it's really, it can feel vulnerable because we're not used to it, but I have gotten better at saying, well, I really appreciate your question. I'm not sure what my first response would be, so give me a second to think about it. Or I might say, what's occurring to me right now is this, but I'm imagining something else might come. If you're fighting with somebody and it's escalating, having a conversation ahead of time where if I feel like we're off, I'm going to ask for space, and I'm not walking away from you. I'm letting myself settle because I want to bring my best self to you. I'd like you to bring your best self to me. And sometimes we just get freaked out. We get flipped out. We get flipped out of our health and well-being, and we're having this other reaction. And, if we're prideful and stubborn, we're going to stay with it and keep creating something that's crap. If we're able to see it and claim that space, we can fall back and do it different. So hopefully you're in relationships with people who would, if you asked for it, they would give that to you. They would respect that you need to have a space. I think the vast majority of people could kind of get on board. If not, if they don't understand it, that's okay. You still need it. You still need it. Because what's going to come next is your choice, right? And sometimes we need that space because somebody's brought something hot to us and we're startled and we're scattered. It's okay to claim space for that too. So either way, like whether something happens and you just get startled, or whether, you have a thought and your reaction, you just want to give yourself a chance to wonder if, you probably aren't even aware what your first thought through habit is. We all have a first thought through habit where, like, when this happens, I tend to have this thought first. I'm going to ask you to start noticing that this week, because if you don't notice your first thought through is just a first thought through habit, then you're going to go with it. And you start to realize later when you've been practicing this, boy, I'm glad I didn't go with my first thought through, because when my kid asked me if he could do this, my first thought through was hell no. And I'm tired and blah, blah, blah. And my kids know now if I say, because I said so, this has been true their whole parenting mostly, because I just don't think that that's a good reason. That's just very adultist. I'm like, because I said so. I wouldn't like a supervisor doing that to me. So I've told my kids that if they hear me say that, it's because I'm having a hard time and I'm tired or busy-minded or upset or I'm in mud mind. And they're allowed to say, you're not allowed to say because I said so. And then I say, okay, then give me some space. I've been known to say, if you need an answer right this minute, it's going to be no. If you want to give me some space, I might come up with a different idea. And that has worked really well for me in a variety of settings, actually. Like, if you're going to pressure me, I'll just decide. But if you can give me a minute and I can get my bearings and wonder about it, then let me see if this thing you just brought me, which changes my whole day, and I'm inclined to say no, let me see if I can maybe be curious about, a lot of times when I do that, the way it ends up was better than it would have been in the first place, right? But I wouldn't have seen it if I just went with my first thought through. So we're wanting to really shift from this outside in idea that the situation is causing my reaction. If you have a first thought through habit, and it's really strong, you're going to think the situation made you feel that way. And what I'm saying is 100% of the time, situations aren't making my reality. It doesn't mean that the feeling I'm having doesn't make sense, given that the situation happened, but I might have a different situation just a minute. That's what Viktor Frankl was trying to get at, which allowed him to have more variability. If he was outside in oriented, he would have just had thoughts of dread and doom, and he would have shrunk, and he would have gotten called, pulled out of the group and killed. So that's where, that's why I think he became such a believer of this. The inside out quality of it gives you opportunity. It gives you possibilities. And it starts to let you not be the person that maybe you haven't wanted to be. Then that starts to help you change your story about yourself over time. So we have external circumstances to contend with. We talked about this last week. And we're creating our own experience of that right now. So here's a question for you. Do you think about reality in such a way where you're the one with the camera and you're just capturing what reality is, and there's only one reality? Or are you just taking a picture of it? Or are you painting? Are you creating? Are you crafting? Are you crafting your personal experience of this day in the stay-at-home orders? Do you have any creative capacity about how it unfolds? What gets created out of it? So those principles that I talked with you about last time, mind, that we all are connected to this life energy, that we're plugged in and power. A movie projector analogy was the first idea, that a metaphor that somebody shared with me, that I'm like the movie projector, and I'm plugged into the power source, which these people call mind. Call it grace, call it a power greater than yourself, have a religious related framework for it, whatever you want to call it. But you got the power, you're powered up. You're allowed to have a personal experience because you have this heartbeat and your lungs are respirating and you have mental activity. The second thing is that light bulb in the movie projector that just, its job is just to illuminate. It's the illuminator, right? And its job is just to illuminate whatever thought gets in front of it, which is like the film in the projector. And those three things working together in unison is what allows you to create your reality, which is the movie you're seeing on the screen. In the cinema of Lisa, this is what's showing right now because I've got the power. I did hear that as a song. And I've got this consciousness that's illuminating the thought that I'm having. 100% of the time, I'm the movie maker. I'm the creator of this movie. And if any one of those principles were to go away, I wouldn't be able to. If I stopped having a heartbeat, if I lost my connection to life energy, sadly, I would not be able to create. If I lose my consciousness, then I can't create. And if I no longer have mental activity and I'm brain dead, I cannot create. But until that time, I have these three gifts and they help me create. To save about 10 years of my own learning, I would say that that metaphor was super helpful to me because of this inside out part. I started to get that my dad wasn't creating my experience, that my dad was being my dad, which was sometimes pleasant and sometimes not. And moment to moment, I was creating up a story about that. And that I was way more impacted by the story I created about what my dad was up to than I was about what my dad was really up to. And the ongoing pain was often about what I thought it meant about me that my dad did what he did. And that's the thought habit that I carried that was probably most damaging to me. The 10-year save is that if you think of your consciousness like a light bulb, it just has to illuminate. It's stationary, right? It doesn't have any choice of what to do. It's neutral. It's not functional on its own. Years later, Russ Harris, who wrote a book called The Happiness Trap, he talked about it like a flashlight. And what I know now is that I am the one that holds my psychological flashlight of attention. And I can direct my attention anywhere I want. I could say, please direct your attention to your shoes or your feet. I could say, please direct your attention to the places where your body is sitting on the chair right now. I could say, please direct your attention to the sound of my voice. You could say, I would like to direct my attention to the bird songs in my backyard. And if you invite yourself to direct your attention that way, you can. That is something that we have that we aren't taught is a useful thing, so we don't even think about it. But if something happens and it brings to mind a thought and it puts that film in my projector and I don't understand that I can shift my attention, I'm going to have to watch the whole damn movie. A post-traumatic stress is something occurs and that old movie comes back and then I have to sit and watch it or I have to fight it. Like I used to think the only way to get a different movie was to get that film out of there. And the trick is, the harder you try to make yourself not think a thought, the more you're going to think the thought. So if you're trying to find some calm by making yourself not worry about being furloughed, the more you try to control your thoughts about being furloughed or not, the more you're going to be thinking about, because you're still, even in your attempt to stop thinking about it, you're still giving all of your attention to that. I'm going to explain that in a different way so that you can see that. Because for me, it was so much less efforting and so much more freedom when I started to be able to direct my attention away, which allowed that thought experience to start to fade, which created a space or a gap for a new experience of that same situation to come. And so that's a big piece of releasing, is directing your attention somewhere so that you're breaking the connection between your consciousness and that thought. I'm going to try to explain this in several different, I'm going to skip that one for now. Also going to skip that for now. The already thought bucket, sometimes people are confused about what that actually means. It's your memory. So that person that's experienced combat horror has visual and auditory memories of that. And those are mental activity that is memory based and already thought. Lots of things are in our already thought bucket. It's not negative or positive only. They're useful, they're helpful, they're not helpful. They're true, they're not true. They're just thoughts that we've had before. And sometimes I'll be trying to do something and try to explain something to someone, and all of a sudden out of my already thought brain, my already thought bucket gives me something. Like earlier this week, I was trying to help somebody understand that their only obligation as an MSU employee is to do their best to honor their contract with the resources that they have today. I mean, we have to try to do that, but that's what we can do. And I was like, oh, it's like the Girl Scout pledge, right? On my honor, I will try to do my best. And then there's some more that I would upgrade. But that part, on my honor, I will try to do my best, right? And so I'm like, who knew that was still in there from so many years ago? But it's in there because I learned it, I memorized it, and now it's in there. I don't use it all the time, but in some situations, it pops up. That's true for useful things, or maybe not some useful things either. So it's easy. It's really easy to forget that you're the thinker and that you're making up your movie. And when we forget that we're the ones that are making up the movie, then we start to give all of the power to the external circumstances. Somebody asked a question about giving their power away. And they're thinking they're giving their power away. When you forget that you're creating your experience, you do attribute all the control and power to the circumstance or to the other person. And so in that regard, you are giving your creative opportunities away because you're not creating space where you might have some new ideas. Very easy to forget that you're not the thinker. Megan, I just looked at the clock, so I know you're probably looking at the clock too. So we want to get curious about what we're making up, and we also want to notice when we're hijacked by this movie making process, because some of these movies are damn scary movies. Fusion is when you and your thought are so partnered together that there's no space. That's when we forget. It's sort of like it becomes like the only thought. It feels like the gospel truth. It feels like a command. People who have hallucinations are so completely fused that they think those hallucinations are real, and that Jesus is really talking to them, or the FBI is really communicating through their molar, or whatever that is. Part of the releasing is really making space between you and your thought. And then from a feeling perspective, it's making space and releasing the emotions of it so that it also loosens the grip on the thought that follows it. So we want to start catching on to our conditioned thought habits. So here are some ways we can talk about that. 3 different metaphors, and I'm going to want you to wonder about these this week. The first is, it's a lot like making tea. You're like, what the heck is this woman talking about? So to make tea, you need to have the cup, let's say that's the body, right? And then you need to have water, which is like your consciousness. And then the tea bag would be like your thought. And what people who are tea drinkers tell me is that the way to get a stronger tea is to have more tea, put more tea bags in it or less water, change the ratio of tea to water, to sit with that tea bag for a long time, or to steep it and get really active with it. And honestly, when I have a thought, when I make tea, and I usually ask people what flavor, but I'm going to say when I make, I have wild orange tea. When I make wild orange tea, I take that tea bag and I put it in the hot water. And as soon as that tea bag gets into that water, it starts to diffuse and make the tea. The water takes on the properties of the tea bag, and it becomes that flavor of tea. We are much more magical than tea, because for tea, once you make that flavor of tea, it's always that tea. If after I make orange tea, if I take the tea bag out and then put like an Earl Grey tea bag in there, it's not ever as some of you are making faces, I'm sure right now, it's not ever going to be fresh. It's always going to be orange tea plus. But with us and with our consciousness, we're a lot more fluid than that. And with tea, the more you leave it in there, the stronger it gets. Same thing with our thinking. If I have a certain kind of thought and I hang out with it all day, I'm going to have a lot of that kind of reality. If I get active with it and I do a lot of thinking about that thought, it's going to get bigger. Or if I fight against it and I wrestle with it, I'm still being active with it, it's going to get bigger. Or if I have more thoughts of the same thoughts, they're going to get bigger. So let me give you an example of this. If I read something online and I have a really angry thought, hostile even, if I just have like a, are you kidding me thought about something, I was just fine, like I was just totally neutral, and into the water comes this anger tea bag, this hostile tea bag, and I'm like just making it, and I'm just like steeping it. I'm brewing hostility, right? And the longer I sit with that, the more I do that, the more I'm brewing that, and it's physiologically impacting me. It's not just tea in a cup; it's my body is brewing that tea up. If I'm in the middle of that, and Megan pops into my house like she's Samantha from Bewitched, because she can do that now, and I hear that noise, and she sees that I'm upset, and she says, oh, hey, do you need a couple minutes? Because we don't need to do this right now. Maybe you should just take some space. I might have the thought, wow, that is so generous of you, Megan. And in that moment, if I grab hold of that thought and I bring into my consciousness this idea that Megan is a generous person, and she is, and I hang out with that, pretty quickly, my experience goes from brewing what it would be like to be brewing the hostility to being more open and brewing a different tea that has different properties. Like, I don't know if you've ever been like fighting with one person and then somebody will call up and you're like, oh, hey, how's it going? And the person's like, great, be nice to them. If you hang out, or you're fighting with somebody and you have some hostility or some, you're feeling bad about something and you're feeling some insecurity, and then you see that you're brewing that and you go outside and you listen to the birds and you let yourself have a 3-breath reset and you settle into the moment, and maybe now you're brewing serenity. And then from that space of serenity, you might have different thoughts than you would have before, and then that new thought might influence your situation. So like this week, I want you to start to notice what you're brewing. If what you're brewing is actually helpful to you, and if it isn't helpful to you, you don't want to go after the thought. You want to go after the separation. You want to bring your psychological flashlight of attention to something else, right now. It doesn't mean you're done dealing with that issue, because that would probably not be good, particularly if it's a problem that needs to be resolved. But you're separating from it enough to settle back into open space, the space between the stimulus and the response, so that some new idea might come through that might be more helpful about that situation. Tea drinkers tell me that if they open up their tea cupboard, I say, what's in front? And they're like, the tea I use every day. In your thought cupboard, something happens, and your first thought through is typically the one you use most often. It's at the ready, and it's really easy. The vast majority of Americans have their first, when something happens, their first thought through is negative. We live in a culture that encourages negativity, a lot of brewing of negativity. It's on the news, it's here, like if they can get us to be reactive, they can sell us products. Insecurity, negativity, all of those are thoughts we use pretty frequently. So they tend to be right up in front. And you're at risk of something happening and you grabbing that set of thoughts before you ever even give yourself a chance to have a different thought. Test anxiety is just the link of whenever there's a test, the first thought I grab is, I'm going to fail. This is terrible. I'm going to get kicked out of college. And then I just start brewing that. And then I know I'm brewing that and I don't like that it's there. So I'm going to try to make myself not do that, which is still me only thinking about trying not to have these thoughts, which still isn't me being open and just greeting the test with like curiosity, right? So I'm just curious if you can even just right at the beginning, when you think about this, if you have a sense of what your go-to tea is, like what tends to be your first thought through. Do you have a habit, a brewing habit, where like you tend to get one kind of tea quite a bit? And so if you have annoyance, that's one emotion, that a thought that doesn't have a T on the end of it. But yeah, so you would just be annoyed. You would be brewing annoyance, brewing frustration, territorial, serenity, anxiety, insecurity is a really big one. Self-doubt, so that's insecurity. Curiosity. I think if you could notice, choosing curiosity first is a really great counterbalance, because you'll just notice how often you don't go with curious. We like jump to conclusions. We create delusions in our head. We go with our first thought through. We never look back and check. What else would I expect? So that's like being resigned to, like, that's kind of maybe a poor me, why me? Why does this always have to happen to me? All kinds of thoughts. So I just want you to be noticing what you go to first. Criticism and upset. I think judgment is a huge thing that we go to first. We judge first and ask questions later. If you're a person that has your first thought through be one that's more positive, that's a cool thing. It can still be a problem if you have to have positivity because you have a rule about positivity and you're only going to brew positivity, when there might be other times where it makes sense to feel solemn or sad or heartbroken. And sometimes if we have to only brew that tea, positivity, we might bypass something and skip. Yeah, those were from a mag. My friend of mine bought me those mugs. Not sure where she got them. It was out of a catalog about 10 years ago, so I can't help you with that. I want to know more tea is like this needing to be the knower. It's like that's actually insecurity that comes from, this idea that I'm only okay if I know more. A lot of our identities can get stuck. Like the first situation, we lead with our difference. We lead with that inability. Yeah. Where you don't, that's great. So, mortality or immortality, but mortality, like that dread, that fear of loss of our life. Right. And so there's a lot of fodder for that. I can't remember who said that, but like if that's a tea that you brew, fear of your own death, there's a lot of, you might be brewing that way more because there might be things that bring that to mind. I don't know, like a virus, right? And then you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden you're brewing that and you don't even see it. And you've been brewing that for half an hour and you physiologically are being impacted by what you're always physiologically impacted by what you're brewing. That's what's creating your feeling state and your patterns. Right. So we really want to start. Yes. If your very first thought through is defensive, you're going to, that's what you're brewing first. So imagine being a partner to somebody who brews defensiveness first. When maybe there's, and I do that sometimes. It's scarcity. It's like, I'm not enough. I don't have enough. So that's a tea that I can brew a lot is scarcity. My first thought through is I'm in trouble. So that's what I'm brewing is fear, when really somebody just wanted to give me a piece of feedback. All right. So I think you got the point there. I want you to be noticing what you're brewing in the coming week. Notice what you're brewing. And if it's not something that's useful or helpful, do a reset. Don't try to make yourself, all the thoughts that you have make sense. They're in your thought parade. They make sense. You don't have to judge or criticize the thinking. You just want to separate from it so that you can release. That's why we're trying to tie the release as the word of the day. Here's a different metaphor. It's starting to notice the thought stores that you shop in. This is when thought becomes kind of ruminating and has kind of a theme. And it's like if you go to the defensive store, they don't sell gratitude. They don't sell kindness. They're more about just the defensive strategies, right? If you go to the poor me store, the why me store, the what have you done for me lately store, If you go to the, or no, you didn't store, if you go to the, are you kidding? Megan was talking earlier. Are you kidding me? Like if exasperation, if you go to the exasperation shop first, like I remember my son, he was in 7th grade at the time, this kid, and we were on the way to school. It was like 7:15, and he was like, this is the worst day ever. Right. And then he was like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, whoa, 7:15 and it's the worst day ever. Right. And he just looked at me like I'm weird because I am. And I was like, boy, buddy, like, it's pretty early in the day to shop in that store. Like, who knows what could happen with the day. But if you're shopping in the store where it's the worst day ever store, that's all you're going to get. And that's all I said. And he was laughing by the time he got out of the car. It was already better. Right. So some of the thought stores I might shop in the, it's all on me. I might shop in the, I have to be the one. I might shop on the, if you want it done right, you better do it yourself store. And they don't sell rest in there. Right. So this quality is when your thinking is more patterned and has a theme to it and you're ruminating in it. And I just wonder if anybody can come up with briefly a thought store they might shop in. The Friday group came up with a pretty good list, and I made a graphic. But I just want to see, like, because I want you to start to notice, like a lot of insecurity shopping related to body image or related to trust. You did that on purpose. I don't matter. You don't love me. Like, what are the thought stores that you go to first and that you shop in? I forgot to push the chat. You guys might have a million stores and I wouldn't even know. If you want it done, you must do it yourself. Everyone is trying to ruin and interrupt my day. You did that on purpose. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We can shop in the productivity store so much that we don't rest and we don't take breaks. I can't accomplish. So it's the overwhelmed store. It's the imposter store where they sell a great deal of costumes and costume items so that you can hide. You don't love me. So if you have that habit and someone makes an honest mistake, and if you go to you don't love me, then that's going to be what your experience is. I can't meet up with your expectations. It's too much. I can't do it. Worst case scenario store. They sell a lot of crap in that store. Boy, this sucks. This sucks. This sucks. It's never going to get any better. It's never going to change. Yeah. That store can up to and including lead to people to harm themselves, right? Because the store, okay, the priority shop, like priority shop, everything's a priority. So you can't figure out when to stop or when to rest there because it all looks the same in there. That's a thought habit. I'm going to try to do it all. I can bring home the bacon, all of that. Comparative and competitive, yeah, the competitive store where you can't stop because somebody else might get ahead of you. Can't stop because someone else might get ahead of you. Last week, someone said, sort of the dark store, the sad store, kind of the painful wing of them all. Grief can be a store, like we can spend a lot of time in there. Sometimes, what else? Bed Bath and Beyond store. Yeah, it's why can't I have it? The why can't I have it store. I have shopped there before. I have spent money and run up a credit card debt because I thought I should store. The entitled store is a store. Yeah, I have the power, the never-ending store. Yeah, the you don't help enough. It's actually the I'm not appreciated store. Nobody appreciates me store. And that's a big habit. Yeah, if you're in the instant gratification store, you can't make decisions about your financial plan. Like you might have a value of like getting out of debt, but the instant gratification store in there, they just tell you to buy whatever they want you to buy. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to give you this one more metaphor because these metaphors impact people differently. And that's your thought trains. That's like, I can be in the station, minding my own business. And this thought comes through like, I forgot to do something. And I jump on I made a mistake train. And I just feel horrible about it. If these are thoughts that sort of take you away, when I feel minimized or dissed by somebody, I can get on the poor me train. I can get on the shame train. I can get on the midnight train to Georgia. I can also get on the peace train or the love train. And if you're involved with some thoughts and you're shopping in a store and it's helping you feel open and connected and engaged and creative, by all means, shop along. But if it's not, you want to be able to notice it, because you can't get off a train you don't know you're on. And you can't back out of a store that you don't know you're in. And you can't back out of a store you don't know you're in if you don't even know you have thought stores, but you actually think somebody else is making you feel that way. That's why having this inside out quality starts to help you be more discerning about the thoughts you're participating in, instead of just going with the ones that have been habits all along. What's mood got to do with it? When you're in a steady or high mood, you tend to have more thoughts that are open, positive, fresher, newer, solution-oriented. You have one thought and then another thought. It's expansive. When you're in a low mood, your thoughts tend to get very narrow, and you're very likely to get stuck in a thought store, and an unhelpful thought store. And in that place, like if you can feel that you're in a thought store, or you're on a train to a bad place, like, Martyrdville is right next to Margaritaville, like down there, then painful place to go. I lost my thought. You jump on, so you're more at risk of having thoughts that are going to take you into places where you get stuck when you're in a low mood. So if you notice that you're in those stores, you could check in and do an emotional wellness check-in, just with mood. Two things really, mood and state of mind. If you're in a low mood and your mind is busy, you're at risk of being in an unhelpful thought store, or on an unhelpful thought train, or brewing up some nasty tea that is not good for you to be participating in. And it's not going to help you. Like, while you're doing those things, you're not relaxed, reflective, and value guided. That's the relax, reflect, resolve. So, that's the shift that happens when we release that. So you wake up and you've been shopping in that store. Don't, by the way, go from the martyr store to the judgment store. This is when we have feelings about the facts that we've had feelings. Like, I used to get shame triggered when I felt hurt because I knew that I had a martyr habit. That's also not helpful. It's not helpful to then shop in the I'm a bad resilience learner store. That's just not helpful. What's helpful is knowing this is how humans operate. We get into thoughts, we start participating, we get caught up in it, and when we notice it, we can back up. How? By bringing our attention to something in the present, to bring our full beaming, delighted flashlight of attention to something or someone in the present moment, while allowing ourselves to relax back out of. Jill Bolte Taylor is a scientist who would say that the physiological life of a thought is about 90 seconds. And that's encouraging to me, because I don't have to fix the thought or get rid of the thought or make that thought never come back here. That's a way to make yourself live in a store. Like when you try to make yourself fall asleep, you can't do it, right? If you try to get that song out of your head, have fun with that. But if you say, at some point, the song will leave my head. In the meantime, I think I'll notice the new PlayStation or the new playset that my neighbors built. And I'll notice that there's kids playing on it and they seem to be having a delightful time. Pretty soon, the song's not in my head anymore. It's a different way to navigate your creative process that you didn't even know you had before. The day you decide that you're more interested in being aware of your thoughts than you are in controlling them or in the thoughts themselves, that's the day you get to find your way out of your thought stores. We get deeply fooled by our own fear-based thinking all the time. If I had all the minutes back that I spent being caught up in negative, fear-based, not real thoughts, that would be great. I'd probably write the book that I might someday write anyway. You don't need to control your thinking. You need to ease away from it. And then as you ease away from it, that creates the space where something different can happen. The power of positive thinking, people think you should take the negative thought out and then put this specific one back in. And then you can get into a thought battle, like but I don't believe that affirmation. Well, you should. And then this, you know, like, you know, if you're struggling with the question, am I going to get laid off? You can't tell yourself yes or no to that. So if you say, yes, I'm going to get laid off. No, you're not. Yes, you are. No, you're not. Like, that's just a thought battle in your head. Have fun with that. There's no good answers are going to come from there because we don't have a lot of data, let alone do we know if that did happen. We don't want to make up a story about what that would mean, because I've known from being an EAP counselor for 20 years, 25 years almost, that people have those experiences sometimes, and then life unfolds in ways that they're amazed about later. We don't even know if something is a good thing or a bad thing for at least 5 years until after it happens. So we don't need to try to control our experience. We want to try to ease away from it so that a new experience can come. Okay, I'm going to finish this slide, Megan, and then right, wrong, good, or bad, I'm stopping so we can ask questions. I'm going to remember that I'm stopping here, and we're going to start with this idea. So there's two ways to think about thought. One is in the moment, by what we're creating and brewing and what store we're shopping in. And then there's also how we carry thought over time, which is what's the story I carry about myself that I think is so true. We're going to start the next session by talking about our thought story about ourselves isn't really who we are. Like when you go back, I'm going to go back real quick because it seems like it might make sense, giving away that thing for later. When we go back to this picture, you are not your thought bucket. You are not the collected and held beliefs about who you are. When I used to think that my story about that I had written down and made up as a kid, like if this was the story, if this is my story was right here. And some other people said stuff on here that wasn't true and some stuff that was, and then I said stuff, but it's like, this is just a very narrow way to live life. When I started to get this in a moment, I can separate from my thought. It also helped me get separated from my thought conclusions. And then it turns out I didn't even have to be a lot of who that person was. And there was creative space to be somebody new. Reminds me of the song Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. It saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was bound, but now I'm free. We can get free when we start to see how thought works both in a moment and over time. And when we start to see the habit of that. I'm going to stop there and take any questions that people might have.
So I have one question to get started that goes back a little bit where we were talking about that pause. And they were saying, what if someone won't give me the space despite requesting it, keeps pressuring? I get into mud mind when that happens and I need a moment to settle down. What strategies can they use?
So I would say if somebody keeps pressuring you when you've asked them to stop and give you a minute, that's abusive, is one of the things I'd say. And so if you're in a power dynamic where sometimes people will do that as a way to make sure you don't have what you need to get your bearings back. It is a control tactic both at home and at work sometimes, where people pressure us so much that we can't have a clear thought. And so I would say, if at all possible, remove yourself from the situation temporarily, go for a walk, go out to the backyard. I spent a lot of time when I was in a relationship like that, getting space by staying in the bathroom longer than I needed to just be able, and then while I was in the bathroom, instead of saying, I'm like, okay, let me calm myself down. Like, what's the most important thing about doing this, right? And then ultimately I ended up leaving because that dynamic didn't shift or change. So it's a complicated question because I don't know what exactly it all means for the person that asked it. If you want to have a conversation with me about that, I'd be happy to do that. But claim it in any way you can, because if someone's like trying to get you to be in mud mine, first of all, like, what person that loves you or wants you to do good work wants you to be like this? You have to really ask yourself this question. And sometimes the thought store I get in is that somehow it's me. I must be doing it. It must be my fault. And, that's also a thought store. But, in the bathroom, when you're washing your hands and you're bringing your full beaming attention to how the water feels on your hands while you're washing them for 20 seconds, because that's a good thing to do, I hear. And while you're washing your hands, you're allowing yourself to catch your breath, come back into your body, and then get curious about what you might want to say. The more you understand how this works, the more willing you'll be to claim the space. It's like my kids would be like, get in the car and they'd be like jabbering at me like, ah, and I just would say, listen guys, mama needs to reboot her brain. And I can't process right now and I'm driving. So we're going to have to, pull over, tell everyone to be quiet for a second because I just need a minute to reboot my brain. When that didn't work, sometimes I would say, whoever can not talk the longest gets a quarter, because I needed to carve out some space. They were little kids. There were 3 car seats in the back of the car. You have to be creative to claim your space, physical space and psychological space. So just keep claiming it.
At this time, I don't have any other questions. If anyone else has one, please feel free to place it in the Q&A. Otherwise, whatever leaving thought you have for us, Lisa.
I guess what I would want you to leave you with today is just to be curious and wondering about how thought works and about what you're creating moment to moment. It's the thing I would like you to most notice this week is how am I using my gifts and what movie am I making up right now? Sometimes questions like, this is what I'm making up right now. Is it the only thing I can make up right now? Or if I wasn't making this up, what else might I make up? Sometimes I'll say, if I had a room full of 100 people, would anybody have a different thought? That helps me a lot. Sometimes it's like, or sometimes I'll say, wow, that thought's really strong. I think maybe I should get curious about that, right? Try to catch yourself brewing and notice what happens when you let it go. And then that something else can get created. So we're looking at creation and recreation. That's one of the things that we're looking for. So I guess that's my thought, is just be gently noticing and try to notice with like the neutral eye of a camera or like a scientist, like notice with curiosity, not with judgment. And there's a really good chance that you're a person that hasn't really thought about this like this before. I know I didn't. And so I just want to get curious about how this diagram that's on the screen right now works. That I'm connected to this flow, this source energy, this flow of life, and that my experience moment to moment is created by these gifts. I have a thought that comes up. I'm going to just do this before I go, just because it might be helpful to people. Where's the laser pointer? There it is. I have a thought that pops up. Maybe it's this one. I have a thought that pops up. As soon as that tea bag gets in the water, it starts to brew that tea. And then it pulls up into this behavior. I act out of that, and that behavior has an outcome. The question and answer response sheet writes that out a little better in case you want to take a look at that. And so something happens, and you quickly brew the tea, and you don't it's like you forget any of the rest of this down here happens. And so you just want to, your witness self, noticing yourself from down here, it gives you a better chance to see, wow, I just made something up about that. I got really defensive really fast. I think that's probably a habit. Let me see what else, let me see if I can let that settle and then see what else I see about this request that somebody just made of me. That's the only way to be different in the future than you have been in the past, is to have a new set of thoughts and a new way that they come to you. And so we're just wanting you to get curious about that. We'll be asking you some questions about that next time. And next time we'll also talk about how thought works over time. And a lot of people feel like that's a new lease on life, some freedom, when you start to make space. And you start to not fully believe and hold to be true the things that you've been told or thought about yourself. And that allows you to be different. I'm so glad I'm not constricted and constrained by the ideas I had about myself when I was 29. or last week. It's a constant process. I'll leave it there. I hope you have a good week. If you have a question that can't wait, feel free to email me. If not, we'll see you in the Zoom room, hopefully next Thursday.